Hello everyone! Before getting into the video, I want to say how incredibly sorry I am for being late on starting Grimtober. I've been really sick the past couple weeks. I'm sure you can tell by my very hoarse-sounding voice. But I have had a fever and just not been feeling good. So that said, let's get into the first video for Grimtober. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for watching. Hello, beautiful souls. To kick off Grimtober, I will be covering a case which combines two of my interests, true crime and the paranormal. I will tell you about a lust and torture killer with a secret life and the notoriously haunted property where he committed his chilling crimes. From the outside, he appeared to be a wonderful husband and father, as well as a successful business owner and pillar in the community. What no one knew was that this veneer of normalcy was what made him an unremarkable but successful killer. Meet Herbert Richard Baumeister, or Herb Baumeister, or is it Brian Smart, otherwise known as the I-70 Strangler. Herb was the eldest of 4 children and had a seemingly normal childhood, although once puberty hit, he began to exhibit some antisocial behaviors. And people who knew him at this time remembered instances where he would be playing with dead animals, which was a huge red flag, and also a time where he peed all over his teacher's desk. That's just gross. As a teenager, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but was never given any additional therapies. As an adult, he bounced from job to job. He had a very strong work ethic, but his behavior was increasingly bizarre. Despite all this, he found love and married in 1971. This union produced 3 children. He also founded a thrift store chain in Indianapolis in 1988, known as Save-A-Lot, no connection to the grocery store of the same name. This business took off, and he was an affluent and productive, upstanding member of the community. In the early 90s, local authorities began to notice a pattern of gay men vanishing. These men were all around the same age, height, and weight. A local private investigator and retired major crimes investigator from Marion County, as well as an officer from the Indianapolis Police Department, met up and agreed that the cases of these missing men were all linked. In 1992, they were contacted by a man named Tony Harris, who claimed that a man by the name of Brian Smart killed a friend of his, whom he had met at a gay bar, and who also tried to kill him during autoerotic asphyxiation while they were hooking up. The detectives told him if he ever saw the man again to contact them right away. Years later, in 1995, Tony Harris called because he ran into the man. He was smart enough to get the license plate number. He gave it to the detectives. They ran it, and they were shocked to discover that Brian Smart was Herb Baumeister. A detective went to pay Baumeister a visit and informed him that he was a suspect in the disappearances. The detective asked to search the Baumeister home, which Herb firmly said no to. Baumeister's wife Julie also forbade them from conducting a search of the home and property. By June of 1996, Julie became terrified of her husband's mood swings and erratic behavior. She filed for divorce, and it was revealed that in their 25 years of marriage, they had only been intimate 6 times. When Herb was away on a trip, Julie consented to a search of the property, which yielded the remains of 11 men. Sadly, of those 11, only 4 were ever identified. Herb panicked and fled to Ontario, where he went to Pinery Provincial Park. In his suicide note, he blamed his failing marriage and business for ending his own life, but made no mention of the bodies found on his property. In addition to the bodies on his estate, he is also strongly suspected of killing an additional 9 men. Their bodies were found in the rural corridor of I-70 between Indiana and Ohio. Julie Baumeister informed police that Herb took as many as 100 trips to Ohio for what he stated was business. Now that we have been over his crimes and him ending his own life, let's discuss his estate. Fox Hollow Farm was on the market and no one wanted it, as it was home to one of Indiana's most notorious killers. That was until Rob Graves and his family decided to move out of the city to a more spacious place in the country. The home was everything they wanted and more. It was spacious, surrounded by lovely woods, and best of all, it even had a pool. Rob was astounded that this home was vacant, especially when it was listed for such a low price. Then he realized why the name sounded familiar. He had seen news coverage about Herb Baumeister and his sinister sexcapades. Rob asked the realtor if this was the former home of Herb Baumeister. The realtor confirmed that it was indeed, and that's why it was such a good deal. Rob and his wife decided that they couldn't pass up this home even though it had ties to a serial killer and was the scene of a number of those crimes. They were successful in buying the home and moved in. One day, Rob's wife, Vicki, was vacuuming gravel that their kids had tracked in around the pool. While doing this, the vacuum kept cutting out. At first, she thought maybe she had been accidentally unplugging it, but no, it was being unplugged at the extension cord, and the third time this happened, she felt that she wasn't alone and also that whatever was there wanted her out. Rob worked at a car dealership and had a coworker, Joe, who was chronically late due to his terrible commute and the distance he lived from work. So Rob offered Joe his spare apartment, and even though Joe knew the dark history of the house, he knew the apartment had been fully remodeled, so he felt comfortable moving into the space. Rob helped Joe and his dog Fred move in. After getting everything moved, Joe was so exhausted he went right to bed. He began to have a nightmare. He was being chased by something horrible, and when he woke up, it was so scary he tried to run in real life and hit the door frame at a full run. He collapsed to the floor in pain and realized glass shards were everywhere, including in his hands. He didn't know what he was running from, however, he felt he had to get out of there right away. One day, as Vicki was getting home from work, she noticed Rob was painting, so she went to check on his progress, and something caught her eye. She saw a man in a red t-shirt standing in their yard. As the figure walked away from her, she realized it had no legs. Just as quickly as she realized this, she also realized that the rest of this figure had vanished. Rob dismissed it as being a serial killer groupie. They both walked over to where she saw the figure, and there were no footprints or anything. Rob decided to install security cameras. Joe was washing dishes in his apartment one evening when he heard a knock at the door. The knocking became more insistent, so Joe hurried to open the door, but when he did, no one was there. He shut the door after looking around and couldn't shake the ominous feeling. A wisp of something caught his attention in the bedroom, but when he went to check it out, nothing was there. Even Fred the dog was acting as if he had seen something and was afraid. One night, Joe was taking Fred for a walk up the driveway. Joe heard something in the woods. Fred, upon hearing this, stopped walking and his ears perked up. As they were walking back to the apartment, Fred took off running. Fred was chasing after a man in a red shirt. The man walked into the woods and disappeared, but Fred was still giving chase. Joe walked into the woods to get his dog. He wasn't sure if the man in the red shirt was malevolent, but he needed to find his dog. Without warning, he came face to face with the man in the red shirt. Joe turned the other way and ran for his life. Fred was right behind him. A breathless Joe told Vicki what he had seen, and they realized they had both seen the same figure, a man in a red shirt. Joe was woken up by a set of insistent knocking on his apartment door. He yelled out, "Who's there?" but no one responded. He got up and could feel the panels of the door vibrating from the heavy knocking. Finally, he decided to open the door and saw no one there. However, the door knocker was perpendicular to the door. As he watched, the door knocker fell, making the knocking sound one last time. Joe closed the door and bolted the lock shut, which made him feel slightly safer. He went back into his bedroom only to find Fred growling. Joe heard a strange noise and realized that it sounded as if someone was rattling the doorknob. The battle with the doorknob became even more violent until it stopped just as suddenly as it had started. But only seconds later, the door banged open and wood chips from outside blew inside the apartment. Joe stepped outside to make sure no one was there, and when he walked back into his apartment, he saw a man in there. This man looked terrified, as if he was running for his life, desperately trying to get away from some unseen person. Joe believed he had just seen one of Baumeister's victims. Joe, Rob, and Vicki began to research what had happened on the property. As they were viewing old news footage, which included names and photos of his victims, Rob recognized the man who had run into his apartment. He was indeed a victim of Herb Baumeister. Rob was concerned that Joe was becoming obsessed with the case. One day, Joe was walking through the woods with Fred the dog. Fred took off running like a bat out of hell. Joe gave chase. When Fred finally stopped running, something caught Joe's eye. He cleared the leaves off of that area of the ground and realized to his horror it was a human bone. He brought it inside to show Vicki and Rob. Vicki agreed that it was a human bone, believing it was likely a femur. She also believed where it was found was the area where they had both seen the apparition of the man in the red shirt. Rob called the lead detective on the Baumeister case and informed him of what had been found. The detective agreed to come out and give an overview of where the murderous events took place. Most of the murders were said to have occurred in or near the pool. A friend of Joe's named Jeremy wanted to visit the house and put the haunting nonsense to rest. They were diving to retrieve dead beetles off the bottom of the pool. Joe felt someone touch his back, but thinking it was one of the boys who were helping clean the bottom of the pool, he chose to ignore it. But he quickly realized everyone else was on the opposite side of the pool. As Joe swam back to his friends, he was pulled under. He felt fingers around his neck choking him. Jeremy watched Joe put his hands to his neck in panic like he had never seen on his friend's face before. Joe managed to break free and got everyone else out of the pool before the terrifying entity could get to them. Joe was working at his computer one night when the sound of metallic scraping startled him. He got up to check out what the noise was. He entered his kitchen and found all the knives from his butcher's block in the sink, along with cuts in the wooden walls. Joe wondered if someone could have been stabbed in his kitchen. After watching some ghost hunting shows, Joe decided to unplug everything that could possibly make noise and attempted to use his cell phone for an EVP. If you are unfamiliar with this, EVP stands for Electronic Voice Phenomenon and is used in paranormal investigations. While standing in the kitchen, Joe asked if anyone was there within moments. Fred the dog began to bark. Joe took the EVP back to his computer for playback. When he listened back, the response to his question was clearly the married one. When Joe looked over the known victims list, every victim had been single. That's when it dawned on Joe that Herbert had been the married one. Joe remains convinced that Herbert is back. The bone was sent for testing and remains unidentified. The events at Fox Hollow Farm continue to this day. If you are interested, Sci-Fi has an episode of Paranormal Witness that covers this haunting. Thank you for watching.